Hey everyone, Kale with the Antique Book Collective, and today I'm getting to you guys with 5 mistakes that people make when they are storing antique books. So these are pretty obvious mistakes for some of us, but for people that are new to antique books or who have never heard them in general and aren't antique booksellers like some of us, they probably are making these mistakes and don't understand them. So right off the bat, let me just dive right on in. So first things first, a big mistake that a lot of people do, and I know it's weird that this is a mistake, but it's storing their books upright. This is actually a mistake. You don't store antique books sitting upright like this. And if you listen to a lot of antique book people and antique people in general, they will have a whole list of random things that you would think is correct but is actually incorrect. And the reason why you don't store antique books upright like this is because it actually makes the pages start sagging, because after sitting upright for 200 years, a book, it gets affected by gravity just like everything. So when you are storing your antique books, you want to store them sitting on their side. And I know that doesn't look as beautiful on your shelf, but that is the proper way to store antique books. The next thing that people do is that's wrong and is actually quite painful to look at is when they just have a giant box of antique books sitting in their garage, and worse yet, when it's sitting on their garage on the floor. So the reason for that is your garage, it's not as protected as your house, it's not as climate controlled, all that sort of stuff. So leaving your books in your garage, antique books especially, will make it so they can mold, makes it so they get water damage, all these horrible things, and even mice get to them. Like sometimes it's so horrible, and I've even seen some boxes of old books that were like gotten to by like worms and whatnot, so there's holes going through them. It's really weird looking when there's holes going through books. You guys, if you haven't seen it, it's something you should probably Google. It's like Funkadoodle. But that's another mistake. Don't leave your antique books in a garage. Leave it inside of your house. It's more climate controlled. Humidity's better. All that sort of stuff. And antique books and books in general, they need like non-crazy humidity and they need non-crazy temperatures. So your garage is a bad choice. Next thing that people do that they have as a big mistake is they have pets around their antique books. And I know if you have a pet in your house, you're like, oh, but he's part of the family. Well, it doesn't really matter if he's part of the family or not, because the pets do damage the books and make the books less desirable to other people, whether or not they chew them up or not. So just having a pet like a dog or a cat in the house, those pets' fur gets out in the air, all the dander. And for people that have allergies, which is a lot of people that collect antique books and enough of the population in general, that a lot of people do not want books that are owned by people who have had pets, because as soon as they open some of these books, like they start getting the sniffles, they start crying with tears because all the dander, and they can't read the book. So that is another thing that you can actually do that damages your book, is just having your pets nearby. So if you do have pets in your house, maybe you should get like an air purifier and have your antique books in like a separate room with the air purifier, and make sure your pets don't go in that room, to make sure that that room stays as clean as possible, and make sure that your books don't get any dander in them to make it so they're not desirable to people. Next mistake that people do is when they're reading their antique books, which you don't have to do, you can not read your antique books, you can just look at them for fun. But if you actually are reading them, a mistake that some people do, and I know this is a weird mistake, and I know a lot of people do it, but a lot of people will read their book like entirely flat, like they'll sit it on the table. And yes, some books are good for that. Like some books are actually made to lay flat, but other books, you can actually end up the way that books are bound. They have like little strings connecting all the pages together, and I don't believe you can actually see any of the strings in this particular book. Yeah, you can't, especially not on my camera. But there are little strings that can connect all the pages together, all the signatures they call them. And when you lay them flat, there is actually a lot of times that those books strings can snap. So yes, there are ways to have it so you can do it. That's a lot of technical stuff, and you should probably consult like an antique book dealer that really knows what they're doing for that. But in general, you probably want to avoid laying your books flat, because it definitely can break the pages apart and have it so they start getting all the pages floating around, like breaking loose. And you don't want that, because that really damages value and you can lose the pages. So that's something else you really want to worry about, is not laying them flat if you don't have to. Because honestly, guys, if you're like me and if you're like 99% of people, you can read a book when it's just at a 90-degree angle. It's not that hard. You just do that and that and that and that as you're reading through the book. It's not that hard. You don't need to lay the book flat. And if there's a chance that laying it flat damages the book, then just reading at 90 degrees is pretty easy. So that's another mistake that a lot of people do. Next mistake and final mistake, so number 5, is leaving the books in the sun, like not just leaving them outside in the sun, but even leaving them inside. So for me, I have a window right there, so I would not want to store my books on a shelf right here. And yes, I do know that I have books right there that are sort of in the sun, but the sun never actually hits there, because this is actually in the basement, so I'm sort of safe there. And on top of that, that's more of just like a prop shelf of antique books. They're not the oldest ones I've had. They're just there mostly to make my channel look a little cooler and make it look like I actually have antique books. It's not just, oh, this guy just talks about them. No, I actually do have some. Again, those are just more like props. I haven't even listed any of them yet. They're my to list shelf, but my main stock of antique books is actually in a like sealed metal cabinet over there where they are really safe. I really take it very personal about keeping all my antique books safe because I'm an antique book reseller. I want my books to be as perfect as they can be for when I send them out to buyers, because if they're not, my buyers will get angry. So with all that said, if you guys would like to learn more about antique books or the antique book business that I do, or even eBay businesses in general, because I sell my antique books on eBay, be sure to subscribe. Be sure to check out my other videos. I've got some cool ones that you can check out there, and you can subscribe up there, and I will see you guys in the next video.